Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining to the session. I'm Sandesh, and this is day 4 of our MCP series. The topic today will be site mapping. Like we're just discussing, a sitemap is an API integration between a specific website and Marketing Cloud personalization. And an important part of a sitemap is it's completely configuration driven. It executes within the beacon that we've talked about in the previous sessions, right? When you do a web integration, you first install a beacon into your website. And that beacon or the sitemap is an extension to that beacon. You configure what events you want to capture, what business objects you have on the website, and all other sort of configuration of that API, diving much deeper into what exactly is involved and all that in today's session. So let's first look at the agenda. So today, first we'll go through key terminologies so that we're not confused about what we're talking about throughout the session. Then we'll talk about a specific document called the sitemap blueprint and how that's important while creating a sitemap and in the whole MCP implementation in general. And then we'll look at a general sitemap template, what sections does it involve and how exactly it looks like. And then we'll go through a specific sitemap configuration. There are two types, a global and a page level configuration. We'll look at those briefly. And then the first 4 items in this agenda are going to be super brief because I want to keep a lot of time for the live demo. So we'll be exiting the presentation and then going to the actual website and MCP and looking at all the items that we cover here today. Okay. So first, key terminologies. And some of these have already been covered by speakers in the previous sessions, but they'll be good to review anyways. The first one is a catalog. Catalog comes in play in the sitemap because this is one of the ways you can actually inject catalog objects into your personalization. The other popular way being ETL, and catalog is a collection of organized and related items with which your users engage. So this is the main business object in the website. This could be products, blog posts, etc. Events are key interaction points on the website. You can think of multitudes of events on your website: login, product purchase, product view, like starring a product on your website if it's e-commerce. And then there are user attributes. These are specific information about the user. So this could be their first name, last name, maybe their affinities, any sort of information about the user that is valuable to your business use case. And the other important one is content zone. So these are the reasons that are actually personalized by real-time campaigns. You can think of homepage heroes, hero banners, for example, that are personalized for a specific user by products like MCPs, or you can think of carousel, product recommendation, zones. All of these reasons on a website have to be specifically delegated as content zones in the sitemap, and we'll see that shortly. Sitemap blueprint is an important document. It is a set of instructions for a developer to follow during site mapping, and the next slide is going to be on this, so I'm going to keep it to that. Visual Editor is a tool that is used to edit sitemap templates and campaigns, and we'll also see this shortly. Okay, now that we're done with that, let's see in more detail what this blueprint is. I think Michelle covered a little bit of this last time in our solution overview. So first, there will be a discovery, right, and a pre-work of the project that deals with stuff like what items are you interested in? What areas of the website do you want to personalize? What is the architecture of the site? How can you identify, say, products on a product page? So all these high-level architectural decisions and map and architecture, this sort of produces sort of like a documentation, and that's called a sitemap blueprint. This will provide a specific set of instructions to the developer. This will outlay all the items, all the events that we want to capture on a per page basis so that we know exactly how to implement the sitemap. An example would be our website will have 5 pages. One of those pages will be a product detail page, and in the product detail page, there will be a product image, there will be a product price, there will be a product description, and then this is exactly where it's going to be. So those kind of details will be in the blueprint, and this is creating or like finishing of the blueprint triggers the start of the implementation so that we can actually start writing the sitemap. If you have any questions, yeah, feel free to put in chat and then I'll try and address them at the end. Otherwise, we can postpone it to the AMA session. Okay, so also wanted to just have a few bullet points here on setup and the visual editor. What is actually required before we dive into the sitemap? So we, of course, need a data set on the platform first that we want to interact with, because all of the business objects, all of the interactions that is sent through the sitemap is going to be interacting with that specific data set that you select in the beacon. And saying that the beacon also has to be on the website, because again, the sitemap is kind of like an extension of that JavaScript SDK. And to actually write the sitemap, we need a tool called Visual Editor. And then this is provided through the Salesforce Interactions SDK launcher. We'll see that shortly in the demo. This is a Chrome extension that you can search for in Google and then download it. Once you download it, it allows you to access the visual editor and the visual editor allows you to write the sitemap, do templates and campaigns that we'll cover in our later sessions. And an important thing to note is that you must actually be logged into Marketing Cloud Personalization in the same browser session to be able to use the visual editor. Okay, so being done with the setup, let's look at the sitemap. This is it. This is the sitemap, and this is the general template of it. Of course, there will be way more details inside here, but let's look at this bare bone template. Installing the beacon under the website provides you access to this Salesforce Interactions namespace, and it has a lot of useful functions. This is going to be our bread and butter while implementing a sitemap. And the first thing that is important is the init function that is used to initialize the sitemap. Okay, and then you actually initialize also the configuration using the init sitemap function. So the only thing, there are a couple more properties that you can use in this initial init method, but the one thing that's always used is the cookie domain. And this is generally just the domain of the site that you're implementing the sitemap on. So company.com, if it's Amazon, amazon.com. But they do provide you with an alternative if you have that specific use case of having different cookie domains, for example. And then the important part is this configuration object, right? Here, currently, we have 2 types of configurations, global and page level. So page types is the key that you need to use. All the global configurations goes into this global value property. And then there will be page levels. As you can see, this is an array, right? Global is just an object, so that will be one configuration. There can't be multiple global configurations. However, we of course can have multiple pages. That's why it's an array of configurations. Okay, this is how all the sitemaps are going to look like with varying details as per your business use cases. I was just diving a little deeper into that. Let's look at an example of global configuration here. So just expanding on the global, I've removed the page types from here just for clarity. To here, is this hard to see? Is this visible?
A little bit visible, but if you can zoom in, slide share, right? That should be fine.
Yeah, I don't think I can. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
so that should be fine. We'll share the slide deck after the session.
Okay. Yeah. Also, there will be a live demo, so hopefully that'll help. So yeah, here expanding on that global, a couple of important properties inside global configurations are locale. So this will be the locale of the location, you know, that you have the site on. And this is way more important if you have multi-locale site running, but that is a whole another conversation. So we'll not go into multi-site right now, but locale is good because this also defines your currency and other stuff like that, and then also associates your data set to a locale. And the other one is on action event. This is not mandatory, but this is often used to inject attributes. So for example, let's actually jump to listeners first. So listeners is where you will list out all the event captures mechanisms, right? So Salesforce interactions.listener is the sitemap version of add event listener, if you are familiar with JavaScript, or just dot on from jQuery. However, recommendation is to use Salesforce interactions.listener and not use vanilla JavaScript or jQuery, even though they might be available, just for consistency's sake. So once you use a listener, you can define a specific action in a selector. So for example, if I'm trying to listen on somebody filling out a email sign-up form, then this action would be submit, and then the selector would probably be a CSS selector like .form or .signup or something like that. And then within this listener, you would send an event, or like optionally pre-process data. You know, maybe you want to format the email that the user provided in a specific way. Maybe you want to add prefix, suffix, and all that to the raw value. And then you can use a send event function that's also available in the Salesforce interactions namespace to actually send the event. You can think of other listeners to add, right? So when a user views an event, views a product, or like clicks on a product, goes to a product detail page, all of those would be listed out in an array just like this. And then the on action event comes into play because every time a user makes an action, this function is run. And this is typically used to inject user identity attributes, because when somebody clicks on a product, the user information is not automatically added in there because we are extracting all the information from the page. Right. And so we need to find the email from somewhere else. So whenever a user signs up or logs in, you will be saving that email in some sort of HTML format. You can see sometimes in some websites, if you log in, then the email will be displayed in the top right corner or something like that, right? Or maybe it's in the bottom, just to identify that you are logged in. And then in on action event, what we do is we would get that email from the page and then inject it into that event that's being sent, so that MCP not only gets the fact that somebody clicked on a product, but they also get the user information, email, ID, and all that stuff to identify or to link that action to a specific user. Okay. And this is generally typically put in the global configuration because no matter which page you register the event from, you want to inject these attributes. Okay. But if you have some specific use case where you only want to inject stuff or post-process those events in a specific page, then you can also put these on a page level configuration. The other important part of both global and a page level configuration are the content zones. So these are the impression regions. These are the personalization regions that we were just talking about on your page or on your whole site. So here you can see in the global, we can have something like a footer text, right? Because footer doesn't need to be page level. It's probably consistent throughout your site. So we don't want to register a footer content zone at each page. Rather, we would include footers and headers and global pop-ups and all the things that are relevant to all the pages on a global configuration instead. And for each content zones, you would need to have two things. One is the name of that content zone to identify it. And this will be more clear and relevant when we talk about templates and campaigns, because this is the reason that a campaign would actually populate based on the user affinity. And then you also need a selector so that MCP knows what CSS to actually, what HTML element to grab based on this CSS selector. A quick note here is that selector is not actually mandatory. You can just have a name. However, you would put in selector for everything other than things like global pop-up, right? Because we would obviously need to select stuff to actually know the content zone. The exception is the items like global pop-ups that we'll see that soon in the demo. But a global pop-up just displays on your page, kind of like in a glass pane. So we're not really displaying the pop-up in any part of the page itself. We're displaying it right on top of the page. That's why it doesn't really need a selector. Now let's look at, excuse me, now let's look at the page level configuration. This is going to be very similar to the global configuration that we just looked at, with a few notable exceptions. One is now we need a name of that page, right? We need to identify the page, and then the name comes up in two different places. One is the name of the config object itself. So we just have one object here, one page, but you can see that we can have multiple of these for each page. So currently I have the setup for the home page, and then the name is home page, interaction name is also home page. This interaction name is the thing that's actually registered on your event history if somebody lands on this page. If a user comes in and then lands on the home page, in your event stream in MCP, home page is going to be registered as the name of that event. Okay. And the other important thing that doesn't exist in the global config, but is important in the page level configuration, is the isMatch function. This function determines if this specific configuration is to be run, because imagine you also have another object like this. MCP needs to know which page we currently are on, right? Here currently we are matching on this /home page. This is a regular expression syntax. If you don't know this syntax itself, it shouldn't be very relevant to understand this, right? So isMatch needs to return, it's a function, it needs to return either true or false, depending on if this is the home page. So you can do this by using a regular expression on the URL like I'm doing. So window.location.href gives you the current URL of the page. And what I'm saying by writing this regular expression is that, does my URL contain the phrase /homepage, or rather the string? And if it does, then this is going to return true, and we're going to be running this configuration. And if this was a login page, maybe I would write /login instead, because then that is how I would know that that would be the login page. Okay, but you can also do things like you can also check for a specific HTML attribute, for example. So if you know that the home page is the only page in your entire website that has a carousel, then you can check using Salesforce Interactions utility functions to check for an attribute, check for an element. You can check if that element is actually on the page. And if it is, then you would know that, again, that's the home page. Okay, so there can be multiple ways you can tell MCP that you are on a specific page. And saying that, now the other important thing is content zones. This is exactly the same as what we just talked about in the global configuration. However, of course, there will be some content zones, some regions that only exist in certain pages. And if that is the case, you want to put those content zones in the page type configuration instead, and not clog up the global configuration. Okay. And the last thing we'll see in this format is the user event. We did touch on this briefly just now when we were talking about the global configuration. I just wanted to put the screenshots here to highlight the two types of event that you'll have, two main types of events. One is the first one is what I was talking about earlier with the email sign up. So imagine you have an email sign up text box, and then you register this event listener, right? If you submit that form, email sign up, then we will run this code. And in here, what we're first doing is we're gathering the email from that specific text box, whose ID happens to be this this ID right here. And then cache-dom is a utility function provided by Salesforce Interactions, which is similar to get element by ID in JavaScript, or a similar function in jQuery. Again, it's recommended to use Salesforce Interactions namespace functions rather than using vanilla JavaScript to do these things. But all that matters here is that we grab that email from that text box using JavaScript. And then if we have the email, then we're using the send event function to send the event to MCP. And send event, an important part is the interaction. User is optional, but we need that if we actually want to tie that event to a specific user. And currently we do, right? If the user was anonymous previously, for example, and now they have actually clicked on sign up and provided us with the email, we want to take that opportunity and tie that interactions to the user. So now the user is converted into a known user based on this identification criteria. And so this is a normal, I would say this is a custom event, because the interaction name is completely up to us, right? We could have said anything in here. This is all that matters here is the standards of our own implementation. However, if you look at the second one, here we are listening on a click on the add to cart button. So if somebody goes to a product page and then clicks on add to cart, then we do something a little bit different in the send event. So for example, you can see that the name is no longer a custom string like before. It's actually a built-in event name called Salesforce Interactions, cart interaction name, add to cart. There are multiple of these events, and it's important to use this event that's provided by Salesforce Interactions and not add your own name here, because adding a product to the cart is an important event, right? This builds affinities to products. This builds affinities to dimensions, and MCP needs to have this, needs to know when a product is added to the cart to process these affinity details under the hood. And one important thing when dealing with items, products, is you need this line item object, which is easily built using the utility function that is provided by Salesforce Interactions called build line item from page state. It's the details of this is not really important. The important thing is that when you register an event that's completely custom, like the email sign up footer or like other things, when somebody clicks on contact us, for example, that would also be a custom event. You can name it however you want. The only important thing is maybe you want to tie it to a user. But if you do something that relates to the catalog, then you need to use the names that are provided by Salesforce Interactions. And there are multiple of these. I'll provide a link to the documentation. We can also briefly see this while we're going through the live demo. There are a lot of these names, add to cart, remove from cart, put order. I forget the exact names, but there is documentation for it. And we need to always use these if we want MCP to register interactions with catalog items. Okay. So saying that, I don't think I have anything else. Let's not go to best practices yet. So I'm going to exit out of the presentation, and then I'm going to go to the website first. So for this demo, I am using the NTO demo that Salesforce has created. This website completely comes from Salesforce demos, and even for the sitemap, I've used the sample sitemap that Salesforce provides. So here, this is the homepage, right? Yes, okay. It's already sort of personalizing stuff. So before that happens, I actually want to remove all the cookies from here. so that we start completely fresh. I should have done this before. Okay, you can see that as soon as I remove the cookies, the homepage changed because I think I clicked on a product earlier and then MCP registered that I was assigned to men products. That's why the get active and men was being advertised to me. But now it's just a general. Now it's just a general homepage 0, right? So yeah, this is the website that we'll be going through the sitemap for. And for the sitemap itself, I just want to show this documentation first. This documentation for the entire web integration is very thorough, and I find it very helpful when going through any of the implementations for MCP. And the specific
quick interruption. Can you please zoom in a bit?
Oh,
Just
yes.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. Could do one more. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so if you go to the web integration, this the whole section here goes very thoroughly through all the things that we will be talking about. We have already talked about in this series. The important thing that I wanted to highlight for this specific session was this e-commerce example sitemap that they provide. This is the exact sitemap that's currently implemented in this site that we'll be seeing through the visual editor. This is very comprehensive. Of course, we need to make edits and updates based on our specific use case. But this is a great starting point to learn about it. You know, if we go through this one by one and then know exactly what is happening on each of these configurations, then I think we'll be in a great place to start any MCP implementations. Okay. So let's see that here on the site itself. So if we, okay. So first things first, we talked about the extension first. This is the extension, right? This is the Salesforce Interactions extension that I have downloaded, and this provides you with a bunch of things. The difference you can see here currently is that I am forcing an SDK URL. You would generally not need to do this because you would own the website and you would probably have that beacon installed by default in your website. Let me also zoom this up. On your website. However, this is a Salesforce built website, so I can't really change the source code. So we need to force the SDK URL to make sure that it's actually linking events to our MCP instance and the data set that I have selected. Okay, that's why the force SDK URL is toggled on. Other than that, this is pretty standard for everything. You would make sure that the extension actually detects the beacon, detects the right account, detects the right data set. Okay, and now since I'm logged into personalization here, the same session, what I can do is I can click on this and then launch the visual editor. Okay, and once I launch this, it will open up this hexagonal menu, and we'll click on the sitemap to open up the sitemap for this. Okay, and this exact demo sitemap has been loaded here. And one of the items in the best practices slide that I had was always make sure to verify your objects in the current page using this left-hand side navigation. So all the content zones that have been registered are shown here. You know, all the listeners that are in there are also shown here. And then you can also see that the current page is home type, and you can also see the locale there. Okay. And yeah, you can also click on the page matches, and then all these things that have a blocked icon are pages that are registered but not matched. So make sure that all the pages that you have in your use case actually do display here, even though they don't have a check mark in it. The check mark is for the page that's currently masked. And to see how that's happening, like we were talking about earlier, let's go to the global configuration. Okay, so in the global configuration, we have this, oh, sorry, excuse me. Let's go to the page level configuration because we're talking about the page matches, right? So if we go to the page types, we have a product detail page, we have a category page, we have a login page, we have the home page. So this is the one that's currently being matched. And like I was saying earlier, it is matching on that. It is matching using the fact that the URL of the current window is going to have that /home page in it, right? And here you can see that we're in default /home page. That's why this is being matched. And if we move on to a new page, then a new page will be matched. So if we go to a different page, now you can see that the category page is being matched, because if we look at that, is match condition, this actually uses a, this could be a good thing to mention. Is match can also be a promise. A promise is a JavaScript object that returns things at a later time. So this is an asynchronous way to resolve to true or false. We could have used Salesforce recommends you not using promises if you can. So you would use promises in cases where you are not immediately sure. You're not immediately sure if it's the right page. So in our homepage case, we can immediately be sure because, well, our URL is the first thing that's probably loaded when you load a page, right? You cannot load the page without having the URL. So you can kind of guarantee that you can know it's a home page before even the page loads. But in some cases, for example, here, I think they provide this for demonstration purposes. It's not really necessary, right? Because you could have also probably used URL somehow to, and then to make sure that this is a category page. But I can also see the use that maybe there are so many categories that you can't really filter on all of them, right? This could say women, men, kids, and the middle section could be tops, bottoms, I don't know, boots, you know, so there's so many conditions here that you can't really use the URL. So what they're using here is that they're making sure that the page element called that has an ID of product search results is loaded. And then when that's loaded, they are checking if this breadcrumb is loaded, because they know for sure that this breadcrumb structure is only in a category page. You cannot find it in any other pages. So they're using this fact to actually match for that page. And this is another example of how you can do it. One was the URL approach. Another is identify a specific element or a set of elements that will only exist in that page type. Okay, sorry, just reading the chat here. That is correct. Yeah, it does check for small syntax errors, but it does not do code completion, unfortunately. Okay, so that is about page matches. And what I wanted to do is go through one of the pages in a little more detail to see, to know that how typically events are sent. So to do that, I think the most appropriate page would be a product page, because it would have the most information that we're sending, right? So this is the product detail page. And when we launch a product detail page, if we look at the sitemap here, let's look at the sitemap for the product detail. Then we have a, okay. We have a couple of things here to go through. One is, let's go through the listener first, and then we can dive into the interaction part. So there's only one listener registered here, which is the add to cart. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see both of these at the same time here. But this is the add to cart button. And when you click on it, and this is identified by this add to cart CSS, right? Can actually show that as well. It's for sanity. So if we go here to add to cart and then quickly inspect, then you can see that this button has a class of add to cart, right? That's how we are selecting for that button. So if the user clicks on a button or anything that has a CSS class of add to cart, then this line of block of code will run. And then, like I was mentioning earlier, clicking on items that are related to products requires you to have this line item property. So before actually sending the event, what we do is we grab that line item from the page. So Salesforce Interactions provides you with this utility functions MCIS inside the MCIS namespace that helps you with this. So the build line item from page state takes the selector and then actually builds your line item. Okay, so that this line item cannot really be something like you can't write the product name here, for example. It has to be a type of line item, and you kind of have to use build line item from page state to actually build the line item for the data type matching. And after that, now you're ready to send the actual event of somebody clicking on the add to cart. And for that interaction, you do two things. One is the name. And here, again, we have to use this pre-provided add to cart that is provided inside the Salesforce interactions. So we can't do a string like add to cart here, for example. This would work in the sense that this would register an event and the event would be called add to cart, but this would not factor into your affinity calculations. So always recommended to use these provided interaction names for these four catalog items. Okay, and then we just send in a line item for this. I think an important takeaway here is that this pattern will repeat over and over with any listeners, with any events. When a user clicks on it, you have an event listener, and then the first thing that event listener, the code inside the event listener will do is grab information from the DOM, from the page. And then, or from a data layer, right? You have to save that information somewhere. Here we are grabbing the name of the item that is being added to cart from the page itself, because we can be sure that when the users are clicking around, the page itself can be the source of truth, because the page would be built in such a way that it already registers a user's choices, right? So for example, if I go here and click on S for the size, then we can be sure that the page somehow, the UI or the underlying HTML somehow has already registered. In this case, it has checked this specific box and not the other ones. So this is the truth that we can get in terms of data. So the first thing we do in any listener is to actually grab that data from the page, and then we send that data along with other information like the user, for example, here. So this is how we send the event, right? That's fair. And then we can check the on action event here. So like we said earlier, on action event fires on any action. So on any action events, what we're doing here is we're actually grabbing the email using a utility function, but we could have used cachedom anywhere that that we know that the email is saved on. So what this current implementation is doing is, whenever user logs in, whenever user provides an email, they are saving that email into this object, window.etmc user info email. And then during our event send, we are grabbing that email from that save location, and then injecting that into the action event, right? So this action event would be the event that is prepared from that listener, and then it will come in here, and then we are adding that additional attribute of user. Okay, and then the syntax for this is clearly documented. But the takeaway is that we're adding user information like email. Maybe we could also have other things like IDs that we knew. Then we'd also add that in here, and then we'd return that event after it's been injected. So we sort of modified it in transition so that when it reaches MCP, it not only gets that event that something has been added to cart, but it also ties that event to that user via the email address that we provided. Okay. So that's that. I was also planning to go through the interaction piece here, but this is also going to be similar because this is another interaction that we have bound. The interaction is called view catalog object. So whenever somebody comes in here, it's immediately registered as a view, because this is a product detail page. And you can be sure, as long as the page is loaded, that the customer is actually viewing this. And there are some specific requirements to the specific interactions. So since this is a view catalog object type interaction, a catalog object is also required, right? Which should be fairly obvious because we need to also provide the detail of what's exactly being viewed. And we need to know a few things about the object itself. What type of object is it? Because not only products are catalog objects, right? You could also have other catalog objects that are registered in your instance. And you need to provide the ID of that catalog object, which is the identifier. And here, this can be any piece of code that grabs the ID from somewhere. Okay, here we are getting it from the product ID. So if we go in here and then right click and inspect on this, because this is the ID that we are using, you can see that this specific element, try to zoom in here, this specific element has a class of product ID, and this is exactly what's being used here. So we're grabbing the first element that has a class of product ID, and we are getting the text of that and using that as a product ID. Okay. So the detail of this specific implementation is that we also have products stored in the data layer, but this is an implementation detail and not really relevant. If you can get product ID from anywhere, from any element in the page, then that's good. You just add that, use that as product ID. Okay. And then you can send in additional attributes that are relevant to the product. Again, this is the same pattern for all of these attributes. You grab it from somewhere in the DOM. So you're using cache DOM to get a specific element, and you're using an attribute or maybe the name. There are some other utility functions. Again, all are listed in this documentation. I think in the sitemap implementation. Just don't want to go through all of them, respecting the time today. But yeah, I think that is it. And then you can see that price is also being grabbed from here. So everything that you see in this is being grabbed in the sitemap and being sent to the event API. And we can actually see that. So to do that, the other cool thing about this extension is that you can open up personalization tools, and then sometimes this is empty. So let me refresh it. Oh, now you can see it. So whenever we loaded the space, you can see this, right? So it automatically registers this payload, and this is exactly what's being sent. So via this sitemap, using this interaction of view catalog object type, the interaction creates this payload and sends to MCP. So you can see that you have an item, you have a price that's being registered, you have an image URL that's being grabbed from this source of this element, and you have all the other information that we grabbed. And this is a great tool to debug your implementation, right? You write a sitemap, and then you expect a certain event to be registered, for example, this page load. And then when you load the page, if you see something amiss in here, then you need to go back and debug that specific piece. So for example, if I didn't see a price, or if the price was undefined or something like that, then I have made an error in either the name of the selector or maybe the or maybe the selector is right, but I'm grabbing the text wrong or something like that. So a great debugging tool tool here. Okay, and this also provides you with additional information like campaigns, but we can go through that in later sessions about when we talk about campaigns specifically. Okay, I think that is all I had for demo, unless I'm forgetting something here. Like I said, there are a lot of details in this implementation. But if you go to the example implementations here and then go through them one by one, they follow a very similar pattern. The only overwhelming thing could be the implementation detail. But remember that you can implement them yourselves, right? So here, it doesn't matter how they are getting the email, as long as you can do it, you know exactly where it is, then you don't need to follow the code logic here. Same deal with products. If you know how to get product details from your own website, then it's plain and simple. You get it, and then you use send event to send it. The only important thing is the syntax of that specific event, which I would recommend going to the documentation to check out. Okay, I think I'm done. I am browsing the chat for
So I see one
questions.
question. Yes, Sandesh. So if you want to throw more light on that, Jamal, thank you for answering the question. If you want to take a stab at it, Sandesh, please feel free to. What should we take into account when writing a sitemap if we are planning to use MCP on different websites? Company has more than 3 websites.
Right. Yeah, for that one, I think it starts with planning for data sets, right? Rather than the sitemap itself. Like Jamal was saying, a data set for each is recommended because it keeps things separate. Because you have to use the same data set and to use the same sitemap, you have to be sure that the structure of the site is the same, right? And by structure, we not only mean the pages, but also the way products are laid out. For example, the SKUs mats, the same attributes are given. The same page identifiers can be used to mats and pages. And this is generally not consistent for even the same company throughout sites. So I think a data set for each totally makes sense. Thanks, Amal, for answering that.
Thanks, Sandesh. And I don't see any other questions. I think Jacob, if you want to add any more details to this, I made you the co-host, so you would be able to unmute.
Oh yeah, I think Sandesh said a lot of the really good points, but when you're talking about doing multi-sites and implementing that, at least from a solution perspective, make sure to be very careful between domains and subdomains. We can capture the subdomains within the sitemap structure and design, which obviously Sandesh has done a very good job of showing you all. But when we're trying to do cross-stitching between multiple domains, it gets a bit complicated. And so it requires not only that documentation link that I provided in the details, but also you need to have a lot more granular conversations with the customer and the potential client that you're working with. Just because we can does not always mean that we have to. For that, a specific example of 3 different websites, what is the context of those 3 different websites? Should someone be moving between the 2? One example that I've usually done is an authenticated portal versus an unauthenticated website. So again, matching your universal identifier between the 2, and then saying, how do you want to differentiate that data? Do you want that data to be all housed within one data set, which you will lose some functionality, multi-locale, open time email issues? or separate the two data sets to be able to provide context for each one of those domains. So hopefully that makes sense. Any other details I can add if there are additional questions.
Thanks for the details, Jacob. And thanks, Sandesh, for the wonderful session. And I see great feedback about the session. Thank you. I don't think we have any other questions. I'm looking at the chat, but I don't see any other questions. I think we're good for today's session. So thanks everyone for joining, and thank you once again, Sandesh, Jacob, and Jamal. And please register for the next sessions. This session recording will be uploaded at the earliest possible. And any questions post this session, please post them in the Slack channel. We have a separate channel created for this one, Marketing Cloud Personalization _23. Please post them in that specific channel. And we hope to see you again in the next week, next session. Thank you once again. Bye.